Not a bad few months has it been for Lamine Yamal. We welcome in Alex Kirkland and Sid Lowe. Sid, I suppose no surprise that Barcelona got this done, but they'll be very happy that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, bear in mind that the context of this is the way that Lionel Messi walked away when they thought they had a way of making him stay. And so Barcelona will be very, very conscious they wanted to ensure that Lamine Yamal wouldn't walk. It's a very long deal, which I think gives them a degree of security as well. I think it's a deal that they will anticipate that if he continues to develop at this rate, if he continues to improve, that they'll be redoing this in 2 or 3 years' time. That it won't be a contract that sees him all the way through the 6 years of its duration, but it gives them that protection and gives them that confidence, and they're absolutely delighted.
And Alex, obviously the details haven't been revealed. We're talking money, but like the number 10 shirt, is that in the mix as well?
It sounds like it is. That's the reporting that's coming out of Barcelona, that he will be potentially inheriting the number 10 shirt, which of course means a lot. Couldn't mean any more at Barcelona being Lionel Messi's shirt. The comparisons with Messi and Lamine Yamal are constant. We can't help it because of the things that Lamine Yamal does on the pitch remind us of Messi so frequently. And so, yeah, the number 10 shirt would be a big deal. We've seen shirt numbers kind of become a weight around some players' necks in the past. I don't think that's going to be the case with Lamine Yamal. It's great news for Barcelona all round. You've got to handle these things carefully, of course. You know, Barca have had this problem in the past. Talk about Messi. They had that situation where, in order to keep Messi, they had to keep, giving him new deals, raising the wages. That brings the overall kind of wage of the squad up as other players want more as well. And that's how Barca got into trouble last time. So, of course, you've got to be a little bit careful. But no, the bottom line is great news that he's staying long term. He's the best young player in the world.
Speaking of wages, Sid, an interesting post from his father. What was it, 19.2?
19.3, yeah, an Instagram post from his dad. We were trying to find out how much he was going to be paid. Now, obviously, the question now is, do we trust his dad? Is he telling us the truth? Is he actually talking about the wage? Is he allowing himself some plausible deniability? But I think the fact that on the day that Lamine Yamal renews his contract, that his dad puts up an Instagram post with him and his son sitting there at the Palau alongside the Camp Nou, and it just says 19.3. I don't know about you, I wouldn't be that pleased if my dad was telling the entire world what my salary was. Mind you, I suppose if I was earning 19.3 million euros a year, I'd be pretty happy that everybody knew.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't be with us. OK, Shaq, here's the deal. You're 17 years of age. You are living the dream, quite literally at the moment, probably going to win the Ballon d'Or, best player in the world at the moment. You've got this extraordinary wage bump. Here's the concern. Any teenager with that sort of instant fame, instant money is going to be distracted.
Yeah.
How do you stop it? How do you try and help him? What's the best way to keep him on track?
The truth is, it just comes down to personality. And you've seen any number of young players kind of come through.
This isn't just soccer related, isn't it?
This is just in general. But in regards to the game, you've seen any number of players over the years come through and kind of get lost in everything that comes with being a professional footballer or the entrapments, etc. But then there are those who... It doesn't matter. The wage does not matter. It's all about playing the game. And from a footballing perspective, from a football club perspective, that's a little bit of the gamble that you're taking. Exactly what does this bump in wages do to the personality? Now, the truth is, as much as that's a little bit of a guessing game, Lamine Yamal has given you no reason to think that he's going to be any different. That, to his interview and in his own words, it's like playing the Xbox or whatever was the other game. That's
the old Commodore.
the old
Atari.
He's playing Atari. He's playing Space Invaders and Atari.
Handheld one.
Pong.
That's just how he is. And the truth is, and I am as reluctant as anyone to draw comparisons between Lamine Yamal and Lionel Messi. But both of them, when they play, it's as though they're on the playing ground. That they're having fun in doing what they're doing, and that's the be-all and end-all. And that, for me, says that this is a gamble every penny worth taking.
Steve, I think when I was growing up, like that once-in-a-generation talent that everyone was kind of looking at the time was someone that you saw come through in Michael Owen, obviously.
Yep.
So young.
Yep.
As an experienced player, as a veteran, was there things that Liverpool did in particular to try and shield him, to try and help him? Or as Shaka said, this is just all down to individuals?
Well, there's two things. There's the obvious one, which is the player, the person himself.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I don't think that's a worry, because I don't believe right now that Yamal understands the enormity of how good he is and the position he's in world football. I just don't think he actually gets it yet. When he does get it, the important thing is who's surrounding him.
Sure.
And who's surrounding him in the dressing room. In the dressing room is just as important as the people that surround him outside of it. Because the experienced guys, the smart guys, if they see anything or pick up on anything, they'll be the first and should be the first to clip his wings. And as a young player, there's no question you look up to these guys.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you're better than them, whether you're making more money than them, those are the guys you respect the most. And so that's the key. But right now, I don't think it matters, because he doesn't get it. He doesn't get where he is.
Yeah, having said that, Sid, it is quite a young, inexperienced dressing room overall, isn't it?
It is, but there's a handful of very experienced players, and I think we've seen the role this year. And actually, this is a player that I think has had a phenomenal season, and this is one of the reasons. I think we've seen the role played this year by Inigo Martinez in particular at centre-back, but in terms of that leadership, in terms of taking responsibility. And I was listening to you talk about how you deal with a young player and what older players do and how that relationship shifts. And it brings to mind the way in which the relationship between Lamine Yamal and Robert Lewandowski has shifted. There were a couple of times last year when Lewandowski kind of called out Lamine Yamal on the pitch and had a bit of a go at him. And I think one of the things that's happened this year is actually you get two things. One is, as Steve's talking about, you get the ability of an experienced and very talented and hugely successful veteran player, like someone like Lewandowski, who can tell a young kid to change certain things, to do things in a different way. But actually, I think we've seen the other side of it as well this year, which is I think we've seen Robert Lewandowski become aware that this teenager is about to be the top dog. And so he, I think, has changed his behaviour, and he has been less kind of overtly critical and less direct. And obviously, as well, the level of performance has meant that he's had less reason to. But I think it's very, very interesting how that dynamic can shift. And so the power can end up, if you like, kind of transferring from the veteran players to the young players, in part because everybody knows it's not just about how he's playing now. It's that this guy is going to be the face of this club and the key player of this club for the next 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years.
Today, cutting in from the right onto his left foot, Lamine Yamal is exactly the same. But yeah, you could have picked any number of goals. Of course, he was in everyone's kind of team of the season, along with the likes of Pedri and Rafinha. And at this stage, he's already the best player in Spain. And a lot of people would say that the best player in the world. And yeah, a lot more goals like that to come between now and 2031.
Sid, what's interesting, of course, as Lamine Yamal gets a new contract, it looks like Ansu Fati will be leaving the club. This is a man, of course, who inherited that number 10 shirt from Messi, who showed so many signs of exceptional skills when he was younger, got that big injury and just hasn't been anywhere near the same player since he's come back.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Ansu when you and Alex were talking earlier about whether Lamine gets the number 10. I mean, the two things happening at the same time really lead you in that direction as well. And I think it tells you something about the pressure, not necessarily of the 10 itself, but of the fact that the 10 symbolises this idea that this is the kid that we're betting our future on. This is the kid that we think is going to be very special. And I know that right now this can seem something to look back on and laugh at, but genuinely, the first year or so of Ansu Fati's career was extraordinary. He was absolutely phenomenal. Now, I actually think he's closer than Lamine Yamal is, closer to what we were talking about earlier, what you were talking about earlier, to a player like Michael Owen. So this is a player that's really exciting because you run past people, because he seems able to score from everywhere, because he doesn't seem to miss chances, rather than because you look at him and think this is someone who is so incredibly naturally and technically gifted. Now, we never really thought that with Ansu. What we did think was that he's just so phenomenally efficient, so quick, so clever, finishes so cleanly, and that's gone. And with Ansu, obviously, there's the 2 injuries, and I also think the emotional impact of those injuries, and certainly privately, some of the people who've worked with Ansu Fati have essentially stressed the fear that this guy might never be a particularly good player again, and it's as much a psychological process as it is a physical one.
That's got to be a killer, Stevie. You come in and everything you do is right, and you're put on this pedestal. You have these 2 big injuries, and as Sid said, even though you're coming back, your body's physically ready, mentally, there is still that kind of drain to it.
You know, and there's not an answer anybody can give you as to how to get over it. You really have to have just an inbuilt mental strength to be able to forget all the problems, forget all the things you've been through. Some can do it and some can't do it.
Right.
And it's not a case of going to somebody and they give you the answer. It really is all in your hands and all between your ears. And some can recover from it and some can't. And the fact that the injury has slowed him down, a guy who, I wouldn't say relied more on pace, but obviously that was a huge part of it, it completely changes your game. And some, again, can change the game, but some psychologically can't do it.
It comes from playing video games and playing like a video game to all of a sudden thinking.
And I think that's the issue. Or that's in Ansu Fati's case, that's the challenge. And in much as we kind of applaud some of these young players for their approach, as though they're playing on the playground, they're doing things at the highest level of the game without ever having to think about it, or having to think any more than I'm on the playground with friends. And then all of a sudden, it's not. All of a sudden, you have to think through every single movement, every single thing you do on the park, and it's not at all natural to them, and they struggle with that transition.
Let's talk about levers, shall we, Alex, which we always do at this time of the year, right leading up to the transfer deadline. Will we have a season or have a summer where we don't have to talk about that? Financially, where are Barcelona? Because, of course, we've heard them speak about Luis Diaz and Marcus Rashford. In theory, have they got those finances to bring in that sort of quality player?
It looks like they're getting back to a pretty good place. And there's been some reporting in the last few days that sort of one of the last big things to fall into place, which is the sort of the VIP boxes in terms of Camp Nou's redevelopment. That's all good now. And that can now count towards Barcelona's income fully in terms of the league. And that means they've been able to make signings this summer. Of course, that doesn't mean they can go out and splash the cash left, right and centre, because they haven't got huge amounts of money to spend, but they can spend without worrying so much about what they're bringing in and how they're doing it. So yeah, it looks like being a much more positive summer, an easier summer than the last few at least.
Sid, where is this Rafinha coming in as like the false nine and Diaz going out on the left come from? Because we've discussed it over the last few days and it doesn't seem to make sense given how prolific that front three were this season.
It doesn't. When you sort of think about it from a profile point of view, you would think that, well, what you want to find is someone who can play the role that Lewandowski's played this year, or indeed the role that Ferran Torres has played this year. Because let's not forget, that's two different profiles of number nines, and they both work very well at different stages of the season. I do think there's a recognition at Barcelona that Lewandowski, while the numbers have been really good this year, that there's a doubt about whether that continues into next year. For the last two seasons, we've seen him have very good starts and less good second halves of the season. There's obviously his age, which is a concern as well, and so they know they need to find a replacement. And it makes me think, and this is kind of based on an analysis rather than a piece of information, but it makes me think, looking at it, is this decision to say, well, perhaps Rafinha can go through the middle, not just a technical one, but it's also market-driven. In other words, you're looking at the market and thinking, well, that kind of forward that can play that role for us doesn't exist. That kind of central forward doesn't exist. So how about we use the resources we've got and bring in someone else who can play wide? And I think, where this is really expressed isn't so much with Luis Diaz, but it's with the interest in Marcus Rashford. And that idea that there you get a player who can do, at least in theory, both things. Can play coming in off the wing or can play through the middle. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think either of those two are the absolute solution for Barcelona. But, of course, you can only take solutions from what's available in the market.
One last Barcelona point, Alex, with you. New goalkeeper coming in?
I mean, it's something that they need to look at, potentially, isn't it? Because you've got Ter Stegen, who's come back and hasn't looked great since coming back from that long-term injury. You've got Wojciech Szczesny, who's, I think, overperformed and outperformed everyone's expectations over the course of the season, but long-term isn't the answer. Of course, they had Iñaki Peña there as well. It seems like Flick had a look at and decided it wasn't good enough. And so long-term, Szczesny, of course, came out of retirement to go to Barca. Ter Stegen not getting any younger either. So they need to look at a goalkeeper for the future. Lots of talk about Joan Garcia just down the road at Espanyol. That, of course, would be a controversial move for all kinds of reasons, with that rivalry, Garcia being a big Espanyol fan as well as a...
At least for another year. And part of the speculation around Joan Garcia is that they'll sign him and loan him out, while I guess Ter Stegen kind of runs his course, or you figure out what's happening between Ter Stegen and Szczesny. Just given Szczesny's performances, and I totally understand the need, and it's a similar conversation that we've been having around Robert Lewandowski. When players get to a certain age, even when their numbers are good, you have to start to consider, what does life look after that player, or when will it turn? And similarly for both goalkeepers. Chesney, as has been, we keep talking about, retired 12 months ago, but then put in this performance. So you just wonder what are the long-term implications with both those players, given their respective ages. So you understand the signing of John Garcia at 24 years old, with a view to a longer term for Barcelona.
So on Monday, Xabi Alonso put pen to paper on a contract which sees him take charge at Real Madrid, replacing Carlo Ancelotti, of course, who's headed to South America to take over at Brazil. This is what Xabi Alonso had to say as part of his press conference. We want to bring emotion and joy to the fans. We want those who come in the stadium to enjoy themselves and those watching on television to say, that's my Real Madrid. If we manage to do that, we'll be an unstoppable force. What's his biggest task, Sid?
Well, I think his biggest task is made a little bit easier by the fact that he comes in off the back of a very, very unsuccessful season. And I think that biggest task is to be listened to and to be able to impose the things that he wants to do, to make the changes he wants to do. I think we heard a very determined Xabi Alonso in that press conference. I thought there were a couple of moments where he was clearly trying to avoid certain issues. He didn't want to admit how long he'd been talking to the club, for example. But I think what we also heard about is a coach that wants to change the formation, although he says he'll be flexible with it, who wants to change some of the mindsets, who clearly has some ideas about the structure of this team and wants to play differently. And in order to do that, you need to be listened to by your players and, of course, by the club. And I think one of the things that was very interesting in that press conference was Xabi talking about the idea of decisions in terms of signings being based on consensus and conversation. And it's not quite so dramatic as to say that Carlo Ancelotti wasn't listened to at all. He was, but he wasn't the guy choosing the signings.
Sid, when has Perez ever listened to anybody else?
Was actually,
in the history of him being president.
Well, no, this is the thing. So, well, yes, that's partly true. But of course, what's happening now is that you've come off the back of this. Is why I say it's so important for Xabi that the previous season has failed and failed so clearly that there can't be any doubts. So if you're going to entrust a manager now, at least in the short term, you have to listen. You have to go for the players he wants to. So I think that's the challenge for Xabi is to be able to impose the ideas that he very clearly has got, and he's very, very much a manager of systems, of mechanisms, of thoughtfulness, of intelligence, and I think he needs to be able to impose that to be able to get to the team that he wants Real Madrid to be.
How the heck do you do that, Steve, with this dressing room?
You've got to be strong. I mean, you're talking about being strong with Perez. You're going to have to be strong with the players. You know, you've already got Mbappe and Vinny who have made it clear where they want to play. Mm-hmm. And if you're talking about changing the system, you've got to convince not just them, but other players as well. So you really need to... The first day, the first training session, the first meeting, the first of everything, you better be straight and strong and follow everything through. Because if you give them any sniff of any sort of weakness that you might not be that strong, they will gobble you up.
Is this a help or a hindrance, the Club World Cup, Shaq?
Well, to Xabi Alonso, it's a help.
You think so?
The more opportunity he has, the earlier the opportunity he has with this team, with these new sets of players, I think it's a help. At the very least, gets to understand maybe certain things that may or may not.
Is it not better to do that in a pre-season before the spotlight's on you?
Well, and while I get it, Real Madrid are taking this Club World Cup as seriously as anybody going into the tournament. Well, certainly as a football club. I'm still of the mindset that these are glorified friendlies.
Yeah, but if you go in there, Xabi Alonso's first games, you lose or you don't put in these performances, you don't play this football that you're promising.
Right, but it's still the World Cup in my mind. And again, I get it if Florentino Perez thinks differently. I get it if people around the club think differently. These are still friendlies. And while more glorified than pre-season friendlies, let's be honest, there are eyeballs on Real Madrid's pre-season friendlies as much as anything as well, without some of the gravitas. Granted. But I just feel that the more opportunity he has to come in, get things his way, ahead of the start of the season in earnest, I think the better.
I'm the complete opposite. I think Xabi, in an ideal scenario, sends them all on holiday, they all have a nice rest, they all come back fresh as a daisy,
right,
and then bang, first day, as I was talking about. Instead of that, he's going to have to figure out how we can give them a little bit of rest. Because you can't just keep pounding them and pounding them.
You've got internationals as well. You've got a whole faff.
And then, regardless of whether they're glorified friendlies or not, you're Real Madrid. You're expected to win.
Yeah.
And regardless of what system you play or who does what, and you don't win, there's going to be pressure. He doesn't need that. He really could have done with a summer to get them away somewhere and work with them, speak with them, and do all the things that you need to do. Instead, he's not going to be able to do that. Not properly.
This is what he's got, though, Alex. This is what he's come into. And as Shaka rightly says, there's a trophy at stake here. And we know how driven Real Madrid are by them. Plus, 125 million.
Yeah, and he talked about this in his presser. He was asked about the Club World Cup, and he says, look, it's an opportunity in two ways. He said, firstly, it's about starting some of the processes that I want to put in place. I can do that right now. And secondly, he said it's an opportunity for silverware. Otherwise, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think he sees it as ideal. But overall, I agree with what Sid said earlier. I think he's taking over here in very, very favourable circumstances. Really poor season, lots of room for improvement, a very talented squad, some of the best players in the world, and also the club kind of remedying some of the deficiencies that we've seen this season. They didn't sign in January. They didn't sign all the players that Ancelotti wanted last summer, for example. They're doing that now. They've signed a centre-back, they're signing a right-back, they're signing a left-back, they're signing a midfielder, they're giving Xabi Alonso all the tools that he needs to make this team better. So like I say, there's so much kind of margin for improvement here. I think it's a really good place for a coach to be coming into, especially one with his kind of strength of character, his ability to communicate and all that. Alex
mentioned it. They signed a centre-back. Dean Huijsen, of course, making it official on Instagram, posting a picture of him. I assume it's him as a baby. Bit weird if it wasn't. We go back home, says his quote. Sid, nice and early, done and dusted, good value, bish, bash, bosh.
Yep, absolutely right. I mean, actually, let's slightly debate the good value thing. And I personally think you're right. I think with time, this will be seen as good value. But, of course, there is a train of thought in Spain that thinks, woof, 50 million for a guy that's only really played in the Premier League, that's still very young, that's had, I think, just 2 games for the Spanish national team, and that before those 2 games for the Spanish national team probably wouldn't have been a target from a club point of view. I think from Xabi's point of view may well have been, but from a club point of view might not have been. But I think you're right. This is a guy that makes sense, and it makes sense. And particularly as Alex was talking about the attempt to sign a couple of fullbacks, and probably one is Trent Alexander-Arnold, and the other looks like it's going to be Carreras. Fullbacks that can be wing-backs. And I think what you're seeing there, and adding a central defender, is a beginning of a process towards Xabi Alonso at least being able to play with 3 central defenders and 2 wing-backs rather than the back 4. Although he said in the press conference that he would be flexible, that he would have to be dynamic, that might change. But there's no doubt that he would at the very least like to try that. And Huijsen is a perfect example of a player that would fit that ideal.
Does this work for you, Stevie?
Yes, on paper. It is, yeah. I guess 50, I agree, is maybe slightly high. But every other reason for signing this guy makes complete and utter sense.
Alex, you referred to a midfielder there. Who would that be coming in?
No, at this stage, we don't know. But what we do know is the kind of player the team needs and the kind of player they're going to be looking for. And one of the big things they've lacked this season, apart from sort of defensive solidity, has been a midfielder to kind of organise the play, to play the ball, to pass it around. Of course, Toni Kroos went last summer, wasn't replaced. Luka Modric goes now. Modric actually played quite a bit this season, even though not as much as he used to, of course. And so they still need a central midfielder, a passing midfielder, and we're looking there at sort of a possible 11 with the players that they've got and the players that we think are coming in. As Sid mentioned, Xabi Alonso likes to play 3 at the back. Didn't always play 3 at the back at Leverkusen. Sometimes it's 4, and he wouldn't commit to playing with 3 at the back in his presser yesterday. But if that's the case, you're looking at 2 midfielders in the middle of the park. I've got Tchouaméni and Valverde there. The big question, of course, I've put Bellingham there on the right-hand side of the attack. Now, that doesn't exactly go with what Xabi Alonso said about Bellingham in his presser yesterday. He said he sees Bellingham very much as a midfielder. He specifically said that, not using him as a false 9 or anything else. And he also talked about wanting to see a more efficient Jude Bellingham, using Jude Bellingham more efficiently. I guess sort of not trying to do so much, not trying to sort of be all over the pitch and do everything all the time. So let's see what role he's got in mind for Bellingham. But I mean, someone has to go there on the right-hand side of the attack. If it's not him, maybe someone like Arda Güler.
Do you like that 11, Shank?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, in that, I still think that it's missing a passing midfielder a la Toni Kroos. But I'm not sure that midfielder right now is out there. But And this is a challenge with Real Madrid, or certainly talking about this version of Real Madrid. You look at the names on paper, and it's a fantastic football team. But you would have said that 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
While Real Madrid were in the depths of their worst spell of form for who knows how long. And that's the issue here. It's less about the names that are available to Xabi Alonso, but more about how we can get them working together. The systems that everybody's talking about, how does that work with the personnel? There's still this conundrum about Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. and that preference to drift out left. Who solves that and how? I think it'll be the biggest ask for Xabi Alonso.
Right then, Wednesday, it is the final of the Conference League. Real Betis taking on Chelsea. Chelsea favourites going into this tie. But in the end, it's all about somehow Anthony. This is what Manuel Pellegrini had to say, what he had to say about the man on loan from Manchester United.
I spoke with him before he came in to Betis. He told me that he was not playing because he was not happy, but he had a lot of complaint about what he has done also, so he wanted revenge. And here in Betis, I think that he had it, and he did it in the way we know that he can do it, because it's not easy for you to pay 100 million for a player. And Anthony is a very good player, and I am absolutely sure that this is a huge time here in Betis to continue improving his career.
Alex, who'd have thought that Anthony would take up so many column inches since that move from Manchester United?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time we've seen a story like this, is it? A player with a huge amount of talent, not getting the most out of it, needs a change of scene, a change of environment, a new club, moving away, crucially, from Manchester United and excelling. But no, it's been a really good story for Betis, and he's been one of the key players in making them one of the most sort of fun teams to watch in Spain.
Funny old game, Steve, isn't it?
Aye. I tell you what, though, you've got to give him credit. You know, he could easily have gone there, and that anger could have just made it worse.
Sure.
But he's managed...
Trying too hard to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But he's managed to harness it. And I mean, you see the goals. I mean, that's quality.
Yeah.
I mean, that is... I'm not going to say 100 million euros worth, but that's definite quality. And so if he can build from here, question is, does he build next year at Betis? Or does he have to go back to the madhouse? That's the question.
Sid, how big a game is this for Betis?
Massive. I would go so far as to say I think this is the biggest game in their history.
Wow.
If they win, this is the biggest moment in their history. We're talking about a Betis side that in their entire history have won 1 league title in 1935, just before the Civil War. They've won 3 Copa del Reys. When they won it, well, was it 2 years ago? That was the first time in 17 years. So this would be only the 5th trophy in their history. They've never been in a European final. It's true that this is a Conference League. It's not the biggest of the 3 European finals, but it's absolutely gigantic. And that sense as well of having a presence outside of Spain, I think, is really important. And it's been just a lot of fun watching them play this year. And Anthony, I mean, genuinely, I think you can make a case for saying that since January when he arrived, he's been the best player in Spain. Alex was talking about Isco. Him and Isco have been phenomenal since the turn of the year. Absolutely brilliant. He has been really fantastic. And I think Manchester United will be delighted, by the way, because, of course, this was a player that they couldn't get rid of. This is a player that they put out on loan partly because they had to put him out on loan. And now you've certainly got the rest of Spain thinking, oh, this is someone we could be interested in. Now, I don't think for a minute that Manchester United are going to have someone coming along and offering them 100 million euros. But they are going to get someone coming along offering 30, 40, 50 million at some point, I would imagine, if there's anyone out there with that kind of money. And if he was to score a goal in this final as well, it would make it even bigger a story. This, as I say, for Betis, this is absolutely enormous. And I think most of it, he's not very old. I think at that point he was 32, he's 33 now. He's not, or maybe even 31 at that point. So he's not very old, but it did feel like this is a guy that's kind of tired of some of the stuff that goes with football, that's had a few physical problems, that tried it at Sevilla. It started for a while. The manager he liked, Julian Lopetegui, went. He didn't get the deal that he wanted when he tried to go to Germany. He's been out of work for 6 months. The logical thing now is that he sort of drifts, and in a few months' time, someone says, oh yeah, Isco's retired. And instead, in a few months' time, we've got Isco's leading Betis back into a Champions League place, and he's now leading them to the final of the Conference League.
And he's back in the Spain squad as well, yes, Sid?
Back in the Spain squad. I think I might have lied there, by the way. Did I say he was back in the Champions League place? They just missed out, actually, on that. He is back in the Spain squad, which is phenomenal. I don't know whether this is something that Luis de la Fuente seriously thinks is a possibility in terms of him being in it now and staying in it in time for the World Cup, but certainly in it for the Nations League. And that's a reward, I think, for the way that he's played. And he's just a lovely footballer to watch anyway. But I'll tell you something that struck me. The other day I was at the Betis' training session and watching him train. Now, look, you know that he's talented and he does things even in training that no one else can do. And it's actually quite enjoyable watching the other players kind of look at him thinking, wow, what he just did. But it's the effort that he's putting in. It's the drive that's there that wasn't always there in his career because he was always a player based on talent and technique. He was kind of, low slung backside and he would do things slowly but with great technical quality. You're seeing him chase people down now, and I think that's partly perhaps driven by that awareness that he was coming to the end and that awareness that what's happening now is a second opportunity and one that he cannot afford. Well, maybe he could now, but absolutely doesn't want to let slip him by.
Real Betis then, the underdogs, a lot of nice stories going into there. You hate Chelsea these days, Steve. It all plays out beautifully. You've missed it, Shaq. Oh, people are angry at Steve.
I wonder why.
What's your prediction then, Stephen, for this?
My favourite team,
Yes.
outside Liverpool, Chelsea, to win.
You think so? You think despite all the stories, the romance of it?
Yeah, I mean, again, big picture. Betis have forgotten how to win a game of football. I mean, it's 6 games since they won a game. They've drawn 4, lost 1. Chelsea, as average on the field as they've been,
Almost a compliment, Shaq.
I've just found a way to win. So I don't expect Chelsea to be at this stunning best of maybe last December.
That's the worst compliment I've ever heard in my life.
But I expect Chelsea to lift the Conference Trophy.
Shaq?
I'd love to see Betis win it, but I think Chelsea will get the job done.
Alex?
Yeah, Betis are definitely underdogs. Definitely. It'd be a great story if they'd win it, but I think Chelsea are rightly favourites.
There you go. Sid, are you going?
No, I'm not.
All right, then.
Thanks for that, Sid.
That sounds like a prickly thing. Who took your ticket, Sid? Please tell me it was Gab.
I don't know if anyone in particular. Yeah, that would be hilarious, wouldn't it? I'd like the idea of... But then, of course, Gab would just be wandering around Poland looking for a restaurant. So,
Yes.
so not missed anything much there.
Edition of Extra
Yeah, I'm
Time.
here.
Thank you
I'm
very
here.
much. Yeah, we know you're there, Sid, but what are you doing? We'll start with live. Come on. Sid,
Yeah, well, I've got people in my ear thinking I'd gone. I haven't gone. I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere.
well, we thought knowing your diva ways.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing extra time. Alex, I think, has gone.
I flounced out of
There you
here.
go, there you go.
Alex,
Sid, how quickly can you find Stevie's book amongst those books behind you?
Very quickly. Would you like me to do it just to prove the point?
Yeah, go on.
Go on, right, let's go.
Dun, 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 dun,
Where's the little
dun.
clock?
Where are you, Stevie? Where are you?
Oh, wait, he hasn't done it that quickly. Where is it? In the toilet. Hey! There it is.
Oh, he bought the cheap one, he didn't buy the other one.
The paperback.
That was the cut price one.
I believe there are still copies available.
Plenty of them.
Have you read it, Shaq?
You can have this
good.
one if you want.
It is really, really... trust me, if you're looking for something to read this summer, it's excellent. Really, really good. Very Stevie. I can't wait for the next edition to come out, which is a little more X-rated.
Yeah.
Where should Ronaldo go, Sid? Where's he been linked to? Botafogo, I think, last
What do you mean,
24 hours.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's 2 ways of looking at this. One of them is that it's actually really quite exciting, and I really quite like the idea of him playing at the Club World Cup. But there's a bit of me that feels a little bit like it kind of feels a bit cynical, and it feels a bit marketing driven. But yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. And I do like the idea of him going somewhere like Botafogo, a proper big club with a big fan base, and sort of I'm looking forward to it, I think.
Sid? Sid, Shaka, whichever one you are.
I don't know.
How do you feel if you're in that Botafogo dressing room? Are you excited that Ronaldo's coming?
No, you're excited.
Oh, yeah?
Absolutely, you're excited. One of the best players of a generation to join
Right.
the club. Absolutely, you're excited. As long as he contributes, you're all right with it.
All right. Stevie,
What?
the question? Ronaldo, where should
What
he
was
go
the question?
Your commitment. God, if this was Chelsea, you'd been ranting for 10 minutes by now.
I don't know where he goes, honestly.
Botafogo.
No, honestly, MLS. Go to MLS and
But he wants to play in the Club World Cup.
well, go to Inter Miami then. As we said yesterday.
There you
No,
go.
go to MLS.
Yeah?
Then we can have the old Messi, Ronaldo again, get after it.
Yeah, get after it. There you
Aye.
are. Beautiful. Perfect. Sid, any huge transfers that could happen in life?
Well, it's just in general. But I mean, look, I think we will see. I think we see Atletico Madrid sign Alex Baena. I don't know if that counts as huge to you, but I think it's a really exciting one because Alex Baena has been absolutely fantastic in Spain this year. I suspect, sadly, that most Spanish clubs, taking out Madrid and Barcelona, don't have the money to go and buy really big players from England, for example. Let's say I think Real Madrid might surprise us with someone for the front of the pitch.
That's very, very generic. I meant to ask you, Sid, you mentioned Atleti. I'm glad you did. Cunha, of course, is going to Manchester United. That seems all but done. Why did he fail so badly at Atleti?
Yeah, that is a good question. Okay, so there's a few things here. I think one of them is that it was a younger Cunha. That's obvious. I think the other thing is that it was a dressing room that was slightly divided, and he was very much in the Portuguese-speaking camp, and I'm not sure that was actually a particularly good place for him to be. I think he had a manager who made demands of him, but maybe didn't always nurture him as much as he might have done. And I actually think if you look at his performances, there were moments where you thought, wow, he's really good. And there maybe wasn't a huge amount of continuity. So I think in a way you can sort of reduce all those things and boil them down to a sense of maybe not the right club at that part of his career.
Yeah. And if you're Manchester United, you're not too concerned about that? Given the uniqueness of Simeone and Atleti?
No, I think if you're Man United, you're concentrating on what he's done in the Premier League.
Sure.
As opposed to in Spain, no question.
Sid, we talked about this on the show. Will Barcelona actually be able to register their summer signings next season?
Yes, they will. We think they will. I mean, bear in mind that Barcelona now, it looks like the final paperwork and the money has come through on those VIP boxes, which means that that money that essentially I'm going to try and explain this as simple as I can. When La Liga were calculating Barcelona's salary limits, they were essentially saying, we're not going to calculate this money from the VIP boxes for a deal that you have signed and a contract you have signed because we don't have the proof that money has arrived. They now have the proof that the money's arrived.
Right.
So while the situation contractually hasn't changed, the situation in terms of accountancy has. And that makes a big difference. Now, for what it's worth, I do think, and this hasn't really been talked about much yet, but I do think Barcelona will try to make a couple of big departures happen this summer. Big departures in terms of salaries.
Right.
And that will help as well in their search for new players. But I think they'll be in a far better position this year than they were last year.
Like Araujo?
Well, Araujo is the obvious one.
Yeah.
And then they have to... Yeah, and then they have to look at maybe some of their midfielders and try and decide, is there someone there that they could either get a decent fee for or who is on good money that they would get rid of. Now, 6 or 8 months ago, I would have said 100% this is Frenkie de Jong. Now, obviously, we know that's been Frenkie de Jong in the past, and Frenkie, to his credit, and he's entirely justified to, dug his heels and said, no, I want to stay at Barcelona. And the last 3 or 4 months of the season, he's played really, really well. And I think that has shifted things in Barcelona's mindset on him. Because, as I say, until about January, February, Frenkie de Jong was the prime candidate for that. And he's not anymore.
When's the Camp Nou going to be finished?
Well, they hope to be in for the start of next season, but they have, I believe I'm right in saying that they have asked for the first 3 games of the season to be away from home to give them a little bit of margin.
Right.
Of course, those first 3 games of the season, you would add to that then that international break in September, so it would take them to the 3rd week of September to be able to get in, and then they wouldn't be getting in with the stadium finished, but they would be getting in with the stadium serviceable. In fact, there was a nice story I saw the other day that they're going to try and arrange a friendly in July, which is essentially a dummy run. So you get a dummy run, you see what it's like, see what the turnstiles are like, the access points, how the fans are, is it all safe, can you make it all done? And they're essentially inviting people to volunteer. Now, I quite like the idea that I could volunteer and say, yeah, I'll play up front, but I think they ain't in the stands, sadly.
Shaka, do you think Barcelona should sign Emi Martinez?
No. I I think Barcelona need to think younger goalkeeper if you're not sticking with Ter Stegen or Szczesny. Think younger and more long term, which means that Emi Martinez at 32 does not tick all those.
Where's he going to go, Shaq, do you think?
Saudi Arabia.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, get paid.
Oh, he said that in a very deep voice as well.
Well, I think from
He gave us the old bluff about the trophies, didn't he? Martinez. He came out and said, I'm leaving Villa because I want to win trophies.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right.
You'll have enough money to buy whatever trophies you want.
I know you're at a wedding at the weekend. Did you see him getting sent off?
No, I did not.
No, that's fine, Shaka. That's, you go. When you're off, you're off. Even when you're on, you're off.
I was focused on wedding stuff, Dan.
Did you have any role? Were you like best man or in the bridal party? Any
No. I was a guest.
Oh, okay.
And I took my role very seriously.
I bet you did, Shaq. Stevie, as a coach, how do you select your backroom staff? And who from ESPN would have as your staff if you were to do it again? So obviously it was you and Paul Mariner, which I think an unbelievable team.
Yeah.
Who did you ask as well? Did you ask Inchi?
I think
Adrian Eve?
the problem is, like everything, the problem is depending on where you are, it's about money.
Yes. And did you have lots of it to give out?
No. No. The problem I had at the Revs was I stupidly, automatically thought that the money Paul was on would be used just to go to Inchi.
Yes.
So Inchi was the guy I asked initially.
Yes.
But that wasn't to be the case.
Why? Where's that money? Where would it go?
Well, he's apparently Inchi's resume as a coach didn't quite fit the amount of money that Paul was on.
So let me ask you this. Say if you had unlimited funds, who would you have as your assistant coach?
You go with the. Listen, when you're. If I'm in the Premier League, right? It's not so much about can the guy coach, because everybody can. You know, at that level, everybody can coach. Everybody can set up drills, and everybody can do that. It then becomes about the personality. The personality to get on with the rest of the staff, and the personality that will fit the personality of the players. So that's the tricky bit. It's not finding somebody who can coach.
Right.
It's finding the right personality.
It's quite an interesting question I've asked. Just what's the answer? Yeah, I found it interesting.
Yeah. So the personality to fit everybody.
Who?
Oh, who?
Yes, who?
Oh, I don't know. Paul.
Paul, you've already had
bring
Paul.
him
Paul's dead.
Paul.
You need a new one. You've got unlimited funds.
If you're listening, I need you back.
Who would you have?
Right now.
Yes. Anyone in the world.
Anyone in the world.
Pep Guardiola.
No. No. I don't know.
No. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so
Somebody from here.
well, let's get. Well, we'll take that. Okay, so the first question you've just completely avoided. The second question, then, who from here? So who's the top of your
It
list?
would be Shaq.
You would have Shaka, really?
Aye.
Why it sounds something?
Sorry. Let me do that again. Say that again.
Shaq.
Yeah, I can see that.
Absolutely.
You have who?
Is there another Shaka who works here?
Oh, God.
You're doing yourself a disservice, by the way.
It's Dan's reaction I'm talking about. Dan,
Oh, right.
when he says Shaq, like, who?
Oh. Shaq would be perfect.
Why?
Well, because as I said, he would have all his badges, but his personality, Shaka would be able to fit into whatever
I see.
the personality of the group. The
chameleon that he is.
Correct.
So Shaka's at the top of the list. Who's at the bottom?
Oh, he's nibs.
Craig?
Oh no. I'd need a bucket of water to put all the fires out every 5 minutes.
For Sid, outside. This is such a Sid question. For Sid, outside the big three in Spain, what football story was the most compelling this season? Rayo Vallecano reaching Europe?
Yeah, Rajovic in Europe is absolutely amazing. If you've ever been to Vallecas, you know that you look at that ground and you think, hang on, how can this lot be playing in Europe? And so that's a brilliant story. I also love the other element of it, which is, of course, that their manager, Inigo Perez, was supposed to be the assistant manager. Let's link the last two questions, shall we? Was supposed to be the assistant manager of Andoni Iraola at Bournemouth. And the UK Home Office, essentially the Department for Work, did a report on him and denied him a work permit.
Wow.
And the phrase was, "We do not believe he can make a significant contribution to English football." So he came to Spain and led Rayo Vallecano into Europe for the first time in 25 years.
That is a good story, Sid.
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, sorry, that was a good story, Sid. Of course it was. Okay. Oh, I hate these questions because you never know the answer to them. Who's the most underrated player in the Premier League?
Jacob Murphy.
I don't know why that made me laugh.
No, I'm very serious. I'm saying that with as straight a face as I can muster.
Jacob Murphy.
Absolutely.
Newcastle's.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. For Stevie, if you're the manager of a newly promoted Premier League team like Burnley or Sunderland, would you prefer to boost your squad with experienced players from relegated teams or sign up overperformers from fellow Championship teams?
I think you could take a punt on maybe a couple of guys that maybe didn't quite perform to their best. You know, sometimes guys that get thrown away have got a point to prove, like Anthony at Betis. You know what I mean?
I'm not Anthony.
But you absolutely need people that are going to work.
There you go.
And then you can have a splattering of ability
Yes.
that hopefully will go along with that hard work that will make the difference.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Sid, you're off to... Where is the game? Poland tomorrow?
Yes, I'm off to Poland with Gab. See if he can find me a restaurant.
That is it. That brings us to the end
I
of
looked up
today.
Stevie's book, by the way, on Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
The only hit I got was a book called Star Force on the Rise. I've just put in Barnes and Noble, Steve Nicol.
Okay.
Got Star Force on the Rise.
Well, if only there was another book delivering service that's around in the world.
Yeah, there are other good book delivery services available, I'm sure.
Read us a moment, Sid.
Is it Star Force
Give us a
on the Rise?
sentence.
Okay, random sentence, here we go. Although my top short socks and jumper all laid out at Anfield, I had to pick out a jock strap or a pair of pants from the pile on the table in the middle of the dressing room. How about that? That is genuinely the first thing I found. Day one as a Liverpool player, the reigning European Cup holders, don't forget, and it was every man for himself when it came to the team underwear. There you go, Steve. That's the kind of gold we're going to get from you.
Honestly.
Those are details I did not need to know.
Honestly.
Oh, God.
I went home and told my missus that, and she went out and bought me underwear to bring in my own every morning.
Wow.
Because there was just everybody, in the morning, there was a pile of jock straps or little slips, and everybody just helped themselves, and at the end of the day, threw them in,
Yes.
and then they were sent to the wash, and obviously some of them weren't quite cleaned properly.
Oh.
So the next day, we didn't get in quick.
You brought your own,
So my missus went, "You're not doing that."
right? What was the underwear set like in Newcastle, Shaq?
Not like that. I can't remember what it was, but I know it wasn't that.
Oh, wow. We should just do this every day, get Sid on to read a sentence of Stevie's book.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Keep us going throughout the summer. That is it. ESPN FC returns to your screens tomorrow to reflect on Real Betis against Chelsea.
Oh, boy.